Perdón, María. Estamos coordinando, después de cada presentación, los padres van a tener oportunidad de hacer preguntas. Entonces, ustedes pueden escribir las preguntas en el chat. María, can you hear me now? ¿Me pueden oír ahora? Better, the volume. So, por favor escriban sus preguntas en el chat y cuando terminen el señor Liotta me va a dar esas preguntas y yo se las presento al expositor. ¿Está bien? Queremos su participación. Gracias. Ya vamos a empezar, María. Buenas tardes, todo el mundo. Mi nombre es Missy Brady, yo soy administradora de Fossil High.
So now you just talk here.
Ya vamos a comenzar. Están encendiendo el micrófono de Miss Brady.
Hi, everybody.
Hola
My
a
name is
todos.
Missy Brady. I'm
Mi
one of the
nombre es
assistant
Missy
principals
Brady,
here at Falls Church High
asistente
School.
principal de Falls Church High
And I
School.
want to thank you so much
Y
for
yo quiero
joining us
agradecerlos
tonight
a todos.
via virtual. And we have people live, we have people virtual, we have people behind the curtain, we have people everywhere. We're just making sure that the sound is working okay. Mr. Hotel is doing live translation as I speak. So we just want to make sure everybody can hear everybody. We're going to have 3 presentations tonight. The first one is going to be about drug habits and drugs in our community and in our schools. And Miss Anna Teeters is here. She's our substance abuse prevention specialist, otherwise known as a SAPS. She works for Fairfax County, and she's here, and she's going to present first. We also have Francisco here. He's going to speak about some concerns in the community with gangs. And we also have Miss Laura Calvillo. Am I saying that right? Calvillo, thank you. And she is a representative from the Federal Bureau of Investigations locally, and she's going to be here talking about some concerns in the community with trafficking. So thank you so much, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Anna Teeter, and I'm the Substance Abuse Prevention Specialist at Falls Church. So a little bit about our program before I start is there's two ways that we meet with students, discipline and non-discipline. If a student gets in trouble for vaping or having drugs or alcohol at school, then they're referred to meet with me. And also, if you have parent concern or if a counselor or a student has concern and wants support, then they can meet with me through a non-discipline referral. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact your student's counselor. Okay, there's a few objectives that we have tonight. First, to talk about different teen drug trends, identifying drugs in drug culture, identifying signs of drug use in your child, and learning strategies for prevention. Okay, so I can't see your responses for this, but if you are able to put in the chat what you feel like your comfort level is with talking to your student about drugs and alcohol, you can do that, and I'm sure Ms. Dotel can see that. So next is just talking about addiction. So addiction does not care about race, religion, ethnicity, or socioeconomic class. This can really happen to anyone. Anyone who tries an addictive substance is at risk for developing an addiction, and this is something we talk to the students about, that anytime they decide to experiment, they're really putting themselves at risk for a future struggling with addiction or mental health concerns. Okay. So next we're gonna just identify some possible drug items and drug paraphernalia and drug signs. Okay, so this is what we call the teenage bedroom, and there's different items in this bedroom, and each one kind of represents a different drug or drug trend. So if you want, while I go through, if there's something you see in the bedroom that you identify as a possible drug paraphernalia, you can put it in the chat, but I'm gonna start with this. So that is a vape. So vaping is one of the most common drugs, well, nicotine is one of the most common drugs that we see in FCPS schools, and it's because it's really easy for students to get these devices and hide them and use them within the school building, because a lot of these devices look like computer USB ports or highlighters or more common items that you wouldn't know would be a vape. In 2019, 1 out of 3 high schoolers reported vaping at least once, and the numbers are still really high. During the pandemic, a lot of students, instead of just vaping occasionally at school, which is what they did before, they were vaping all day, every day, and a lot of them developed an addiction that now they're really struggling to break now that they're back in school. And nicotine really does affect the brain. It affects learning and impulse control. And again, it's one of the most addictive, nicotine's one of the most addictive substances that you can possibly get your hands on, and a lot of people underestimate that. Okay, I think there might be technical difficulties. Is there a technical difficulty? No? Okay. All right, well, while they try to figure that out, I'll just talk more generally about some of these substances. So probably the next most common substance that we see in school is marijuana. There's a lot of different ways that teenagers consume marijuana, and the most popular way that we see right now is through vaping THC cartridges. And one of the reasons why students do vape THC cartridges is because they are easier to hide, they don't smell like traditional marijuana, and they're really strong, so they're very potent. So students that use marijuana cartridges are getting really high and putting themselves in quite dangerous situations and not really realizing it. Another way that students do use marijuana too is through edibles, which are candy or baked goods that have marijuana baked into it or mixed into it. And that's where we see a lot of students having to go to the emergency room, is because they are very, very potent and people underestimate them, and students will get really high and suffer from panic attacks or anxiety and paranoia and have to go to the hospital because of those effects. All right, so the next common substance that we see in high school is alcohol. And we see this at high school parties, and then continuing into college, a lot of students start binge drinking, which is drinking a lot of between 4 to 5 drinks within a 1 hour period. And about 14% of high school students binge drink. And binge drinking is really dangerous, and this is something we talk about with our students, is you can die from alcohol poisoning. So you want to make sure that you're really safe, and that if you see a friend or someone you're with is really drunk and not responsive, that you call 911 to get them help. And that's something we want to make sure you talk to your students about as well, that they won't get in trouble if they call for help, and really that's the only way to save someone's lives. And a lot of people just think that someone's going to sleep it off and feel better in the morning, but in reality, their body is shutting down from alcohol poisoning. Okay. All right, so next we're going to talk about some drugs that you would see maybe in your bathroom that can be abused by teenagers. Okay. One of the ones that we're seeing now that's being used is like cough medicine. So some students call these triple C's, and it's a type of cough medicine that comes in a red pill. You can also buy the liquid cough medicine, and students will take a large dose of this, like over the prescribed dose, to try to mimic the feelings of being high on marijuana or other drugs. And this is really dangerous. Some students can overdose on cough medicine and have to go to the hospital. So it can definitely cause some serious health effects. And because it's easier for them to get, because they can get it at the drugstore, that's why we're seeing it abused more this year than really ever before. So this is the big one that we are really talking about with every single student we meet with this year, and that's opioids. So opioids are prescription painkillers. They're usually prescribed if you have a serious surgery or if you get into like a serious car accident injury. And the problem is they're very, very addictive. And a lot of parents who get prescribed opioids after they finish taking the amount that they need to get through their pain will just keep the bottles like in their medicine cabinets. And then their students will take the pills and either sell them or take them, and then that's kind of the start of a lot of opioid addiction. The other part of this that is really dangerous is now we're seeing a lot of fake pills. So drug dealers or people that sell these pills will buy pill presses, and they'll mix an opioid called fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, with Percocet or another type of pill. And fentanyl is very, very deadly. So it only takes a very small amount of fentanyl that could kill someone. And that's our biggest concern, is we are seeing students overdose and die by only taking 1 or 2 of these pills that they think are real but are really fake. Another type of prescription pill that we see is abused are benzos, which most commonly is Xanax. And Xanax is a sedative, so it's like a sleeping pill. It's used by doctors to prescribe to people that might have panic attacks or like severe phobias. And a lot of students will also use this to get high, to sleep, to relax. And they're buying these from friends of friends that also don't realize that fentanyl is being put into these pills as well. So really, we tell the students we meet with, any pill you take, only one could kill you. You don't know what's really in any of them because they can look very real and be essentially completely fake and completely deadly. So if you really take anything from this presentation, it's to talk to your student about prescription pill overdoses and to tell them to really like never take a pill unless it's prescribed by a doctor. Okay. This is like, all right. Okay. So Benadryl is another like common over-the-counter medication that there is a trend on TikTok, which is a social media platform, of people taking large doses of Benadryl, which is an allergy medication, and we're feeling the effects of being high from this as well. And large doses of this can cause serious problems like hallucinations, seizures, and even death. So again, you might have no idea that you have this in your medicine cabinet and that your student is abusing it until you start paying attention to like what you have and being like really careful about where you keep your medication. And also our program has medication lock boxes. So if you are prescribed one of these medications that your student could abuse, like please contact the school and they'll contact me and I can give you one of those lock boxes that you can lock up your medication at home. So inhalants are also a common household item that can be abused as a drug. So there's liquids and aerosols, gases and nitrates. So the common things that you might see is like a whipped cream can, an aerosol, so it's like a hairspray bottle. There's different ways that students can essentially huff or sniff these drugs and get high from them. And this is also one of those drugs where we tell students, like, you can just do this one time and it can cause you to have to go to the hospital or even like die because this is really dangerous. The chemicals go to your brain very, very quickly and can hurt you due to like a lack of oxygen in the brain. Okay, so this was more of a pandemic hype around doing this. I don't think students are really doing this anymore, but even hand sanitizer is made of alcohol. So there were students that during the pandemic were being referred to us for drinking hand sanitizer to try to get drunk. And of course, even though the main component is alcohol, there's a lot of other chemicals in hand sanitizer that can damage your nervous system and cause some serious health effects. All right, paraphernalia. So a lot of things like that you wouldn't expect to be used for drugs can be used for drugs, especially marijuana. So you see in this picture, there's like the honey bottle, the tin foil. Even some students will smoke marijuana out of like a plastic water bottle or an apple. So it's just really to be careful about, or be observant, I guess is the best way to put it, of some of these items being used for smoking marijuana or other things. Or some people hide like alcohol in a plastic water bottle, so you might think it's water. So that's like another example of just being really careful and like really diligent about what your student is doing. The dark web. So the dark web is a way for students to get not only like drugs and alcohol, but other dangerous things. And kids are really good at the internet and technology generally. I have students tell me every day things that I've never heard of before that they can do quite easily on the internet. So monitoring internet usage is really important. And a lot of drug dealing and like buying drugs is happening now over Snapchat because those messages disappear. So there's a lot to be learned about how students are using social media now to either buy or sell drugs or connect with people within the school to buy and sell drugs. All right, let me go here. So signs of potential drug use, a lot of these signs could be something else. But it could be drug use. But I don't want you to think just because your student has like a runny nose that they are using drugs, because that's not always the case and like usually not the case. But most commonly, the ones that we see when students are high in the community or at school is bloodshot eyes, dilated pupils. You can tell a lot, especially if it's your student, you know what they look like normally, so you can kind of tell if something's off. Confusion, another thing, like, or talking quickly, panicked. Like panic attacks is a very common symptom, especially with marijuana. Or paranoia. So if you notice your student feeling like they can't breathe or they're really stressed out and they just seem off, that could be an indication that they could be under the influence. So again, these signs of drug use could be something else. But mood swings, obviously teenagers are very moody, so that's not necessarily the best indication. However, especially with nicotine, so students that are addicted to vaping, when they get their vapes taken away by their parents or by the school, we definitely see like an increase in irritation and moodiness and anger, because when your brain is that addicted to nicotine and you're not getting it, it definitely causes like a severe emotional reaction. Another one, loss of appetite, but also like gain of appetite. If you smoking marijuana can make people feel hungry or feel like very, very tired and sleepy. So again, the best indication for all of these signs is something that's out of the ordinary for your student, so, or for your child. So if something's off, if you feel like something's off, it could mean that they are using drugs, and the best thing to do is like contact the school, and we can meet with them and provide support in a screening to see if they might be using. Okay, so experiences change the brain. We try to focus our interventions when we work with students a lot on the brain, because your brain doesn't finish developing until you're 25. So any drug use before the age of 25 can really affect long-term brain development, and we see that a lot with like marijuana and memory. A lot of students that use a lot of marijuana have a very downward decline of their ability to like remember things, whether it's school related or just like related to life. Stress, lack of sleep, trauma, all of these things can like change your brain over time. But there's also like positive ways to change the brain. So therapy can change your brain in a good way, love and attachment, involvement in school and activities, supportive friendships, and having role models. So those are the things we try to incorporate into students that we are concerned about. If there's substances, is we want to definitely make sure first and foremost that they feel supported both in the school building and at home. So communicating with your teen about drugs or really anything. So it can be very stressful and scary if you think that your student might be using drugs or alcohol. It's definitely important to try to find out the root of why they're using. A lot of parents, because they're scared, will yell at their student or like interrogate their student and make them like afraid to be honest with their parents, and that can really make things worse. So again, if you feel like at a loss of how to talk to your student about this, we can definitely help that as well. But the main thing we want to do is like find out why they're using and try to like help them feel better about the situation that they're in and the environment they're in, so they feel like they don't have to turn to drugs or alcohol to feel better about themselves or a situation. So there are a lot of resources in Fairfax County. There's specifically been a lot of resources put into place when it comes to vaping. So Fairfax County has a text line that students can text to get support if they're trying to quit nicotine. And it's a 24/7 on demand, because addiction, especially to nicotine, is like so hard to quit in the beginning that they want to make sure that students feel like anytime they feel a craving, no matter what time of the day, they can reach out to get some support. If there's any other concerns outside nicotine, or your student has tried this and it hasn't worked, we have our program, the Substance Abuse Prevention Program, has a partnership with Fairfax CSB, which is the Mental Health Services, to directly refer them to get services through the county. So that's individual or group therapy. Okay, and then there's just some resources. I don't know if you guys can even see the screen, but I'll leave the resources up there. But I don't, if there's questions, I have a couple minutes for that. Okay, thank you. Okay. So our recommendation, if a parent wants like concrete results about whether or not they're using, is most urgent cares or your child's pediatrician can do a drug screen. So if you are like very concerned, you can make an appointment for them to get a urine screen at a medical facility to find out if they test positive for any drugs. You're welcome. Okay. Are you saying like, do they need to do it right away, kind of? Is that?
Is there a specific window for that test?
Different drugs come out of your system differently. So marijuana usually stays in your system for like 30 days, depending on how often you're using. But some other drugs like pills or like opioids will clear out of the system like quicker. So there's no like exact window. You really just as soon as you can get an appointment is usually the best. You can also buy over the counter at CVS or Walmart. You can buy drug screens. But sometimes we recommend it's better to take them to the doctor because students don't always want to cooperate with their parents being the ones to give them the drug tests at home. Yeah, we can do one more. We're good. Yeah. It's actually very similar to the marijuana. So like the red eyes will be for other drugs too, but the main thing is like just being like, if you can translate, just kind of being like out of it. You're like, it's not just like sleepy, it's like almost like nodding out, like they can't keep their head up. And yeah, so it's not like they're sleepy as much as it's just they're like, yeah, they're just like out of it. They can't really pay attention. They're struggling to like keep their eyes open, and they just sometimes they feel like they're not coordinated, like they're not walking right. A lot of the stronger drugs too. It's almost like it's almost like you'll know, like it's like you know it when you see it type of thing. Like it will be very out of the ordinary from what you're used to. Oh, that's it. Okay. Oh, thank you. And uh, yeah, if they want to reach out for anything, or if they want any resources, I can send them to you. Thank you.
Hi everybody, how you doing? My name is Francisco Klockner. I'm the Gang Prevention Coordinator for Fairfax County. And just to briefly explain what I do is I'm responsible to coordinate a collaborative response so kids don't join gangs, to help kids and young adults who are in it to get out of it, and also to support the police and the courts to make sure that we are holding gang members accountable if they're committing crime in the community. A lot of the work is with working with a bunch of different organizations, including the schools, the courts, police, recreation services, churches, our community services board, with mental health and substance abuse, just to name a few. So today I'm going to talk about gang and gang prevention. Here's the agenda. I'm going to talk about what is a gang, why youth join gangs, what to look out for, what you, parents, can do, in the county responses, and some additional resources for you guys. So different states have different laws for what a gang is. They're mostly the same, but they're slightly different. So here in Virginia, a criminal street gang is a group of 3 or more people, could be formal or informal, and their primary objective is to commit and be involved in criminal activity. They're going to have an identifiable name or identifying sign or symbol, and also the group has had to have collectively or individually committed 2 crimes, one of which is a violent crime. Once that is done, the police can certify them as a gang, and could charge some gang members with criminal street gang participation. I did want to make it clear that it is not illegal to be in a gang. You won't be charged if you're in a gang, but if you're committing crime for the benefit of your gang, you could be charged with street gang participation. Real briefly, what kind of crimes do gangs commit? I mean, they're involved in all kinds of different crime. The reason we put these crime up here, these serious crime, you're going to see murder, rapes, robberies, human trafficking, drug dealing, shootings, is because as young people get more involved in that lifestyle, in the gang lifestyle, they gravitate towards more serious crime, and that's why we want to prevent kids from joining gangs, and that's the main purpose of this participation, so you can assist your kids and look out for certain things so they do not go in that direction. Why do kids join gangs? It's a bunch of different reasons. It's different for every kid. Could be the same for some kids. One of the main ones is a sense of belonging. Most teenagers want to feel like they belong to something, and the gang can fulfill that need for them. Love and family. A kid may feel like he's not receiving love in the home, and they're looking to be loved, and the gang ends up being their family. Excitement. Again, gangs are involved in criminal activity. I mean, it could be fighting, drug use, to name a few things, and this could be exciting for some young people. Peer pressure. Kids join, and it's not always that somebody's pressuring somebody. I mean, it could be that they're just friends and they want to still hang out with their friends, and they know these people since they're very young. But it could also be peer pressure and people being like, why aren't you joining? Like, we've been friends for a long time. And sometimes they get pressured into it. Some kids join because they live in poverty, and they feel like they need money, or they feel like they need to support their families. They take on this caretaker role in the family as well. Also, power and respect. When somebody's in a gang, their currency is fear, and that gives them power in communities, because people end up fearing them because of their violent nature. Protection. Okay. Sometimes young people are being bullied or being harassed. It could be in the schools, it could be in their neighborhood, and they are looking for people to protect them. And sometimes it ends up being a gang. Intimidation and fear. Sometimes kids join because they are forced to join, and they're being intimidated, and they're being told, if you don't join, we're going to do this to you, or we're going to do something to your family. So we've had cases like that as well. I'm going to jump through some of these different slides just because we have a limited amount of time. So there's different things that can contribute to vulnerability for somebody to join a gang. Risk factors that increase the chances of a young person joining a gang, and we're going to break it down into 5 different domains: the neighborhood domain, family, school, peer group, and individual domain. So in a neighborhood, all these different things listed here are going to increase the chances of a young person joining a gang. Is there a presence of gangs in the neighborhood? If there's no gangs, they're not going to be joining a gang unless they create one themselves. There's generally availability of drugs, but also criminal activity. But part of that is also because of the fear that the gangs create in the neighborhoods. And if people are talking to the police, they fear that there may be retaliation. There's going to be mistrust of the police, and they will not want to even talk to the police. So a lot of crime is not reported, so it keeps happening, and people keep being victimized in the communities. There's also lack of resources and poverty in the neighborhoods. Risk factors in the family domain. It's important to have structure and rules in the home to hold the kids accountable in the home. Lack of supervision. Sometimes parents have to work a couple jobs, and the kids can be on the street getting to know people, and sometimes it ends up being gang members. So we want them to be involved in after-school activities, or at least have some adult, a parent or caregiver, supervising them in their activities. Also, there can be other factors such as domestic violence, child abuse or neglect in the home. This also is a risk factor if a young person has experienced that. Risk factors in the school context. If a young person is just not doing well academically in the school, it could be for different reasons. Some of the reasons here listed, learning disabilities, you know, has difficulty with English, not familiar with the education system here. They don't feel supported by the school. They're not connected to the teachers or even coaches or counselors. They feel isolated from that. There can also be low commitment to school through truancy, just not going to school at all or missing a lot of classes. And again, that's going to impact their academics. And there also could be a perception that higher education, going to college, or education in general is not that important right now and it's not useful, and they would rather make money right now, and that's more important. Risk factors in the context of the peer group. Who are these young people associating with? If they're associating with other kids who are doing drugs, who are getting in trouble in school for behavioral reasons, who are getting in trouble with the law, who are not connected positively to the school. I mean, it could be just in general in terms of maybe these other kids are not going to school or they're not playing sports. Again, they don't feel connected to the school. Those friends are also not well supervised by their parents. They're kind of left alone to do what they please. And also friend group that are associating with older males that are involved in things that could be alcohol, drugs, criminal activity, things of that nature, and they're pulling them into that lifestyle. The last one is individual. Could be individual risk factors. Again, we kind of talked about this. They perceive that they just don't have many opportunities. They don't have a lot of hope for their future. They've been exposed to family and community violence. They've experienced a lot of trauma in their life. They have felt like they've been discriminated or excluded. They also, you know, lack some good critical thinking and decision-making skills. So these are some things that we see when we start seeing kids go into that direction of potentially being gang involved. So parents need to be alert if their kids start skipping school frequently, leaving home without permission, not following the rules in the home, not even returning home to sleep, spending a lot of time on their cell phone and on the internet, you know, so if nobody's monitoring who they're associating with and the type of people they're meeting on the computer and on the internet and on the cell phone, the young person could be coming home with money, drugs, weapons, new cell phones, new clothes. We don't know where this stuff is coming from, who is giving it to them. You're starting to smell different things such as alcohol and drugs. They could be listening to new music, and it could be associated with gang activity. Again, you're finding weapons in the backpacks or knives. That's because as you start associating into this gang and criminal lifestyle, you're gonna have a lot more contact with violence and being a perpetrator and also a victim of violence. The youth begins to draw certain symbols and numbers constantly. They're kind of infatuated by it. They change the way they dress. Sometimes they start only wearing certain colors and not wearing other colors, getting certain tattoos. Again, a lot of young people have tattoos nowadays, but this could be more specific to gangs. Bruises and marks they can't explain again, because sometimes it's not only being victimized by issues that one gang has with a rival gang, but it's also within their own gangs if they're not following the rules or they're being disciplined. They start to communicate a lot with hand signs. Having said that, I want everybody to know that the majority of kids do not join gangs. Overwhelming majority of kids do not join gangs. There is gang activity in the United States. It's in the cities, it's in the suburbs, it's in the rural areas. Here in Fairfax County, compared to other jurisdictions of similar size, we have very little gang activity, but there is gang activity. And again, the purpose of this presentation is because if you're starting to see these risk factors, we want you guys to intervene, and we want you guys to seek help so they don't go in that direction where they could get in trouble with the law and potentially go away for a long time, or they could really get hurt as well. So we're going to skip a couple of these things. And real briefly, it's hard to identify somebody if they're in a gang just by one thing. For example, clothes. Back in the day, people that were in gangs, they would really show what gang they were in. They could be dressed head to toe in one color, certain numbers, certain symbols. The police knew, but they also knew that the police were identifying them, so they changed that. Nowadays, it's a lot more subtle things. So don't jump to any conclusions just because of one particular indicator of somebody being in a gang. It's a totality of things, who they're hanging out, what they're involved in, combined with some things that they're wearing and not wearing, certain symbols and certain numbers. So what can parents do? Again, so we talked about risk factors for kids for joining gangs. Again, just because they have those risk factors doesn't mean they're going to join, but if we're starting to see it, just in case, we want you parents to address it. The community can help. There's different organizations that can help, but there's things that need to be done at home. You need to know your child's friends. You need to know who he hangs out with, where they live, what kind of things that they're into, and talk to their parents as well. We talked about supervision. You have to actively supervise. You have to check every now and then. As a kid grows up, they should have more independence, but every now and then it's important just to make sure that they're doing the right thing and they're not putting themselves in danger. Check that cell phone, check the computer. You know, if they're doing the right thing, maybe they can have more liberty. It depends on you, but if they're not, you should be checking it more often or taking it away to keep them safe. Positive structured activities. When you're in positive structured activities, could be sports, could be martial arts, could be the arts. They're involved with other peers that are involved in positive things. There's supervision, there's adults, there's coaches there. It's important to occupy your kids' time in these positive activities. Talk with your kids, increase your communication, show them you love them. You want to have a relationship. You don't want a gang member to treat your kid and talk to them and get to know them. You're the one that needs to do that. Establishing structures, rules, and boundaries at home. Kids learn through different things. They learn through consequences. They learn through praising. They learn through positive and negative consequences as well. It's important to have that structure in the home and to guide them. Academic support if they're not doing well. Talk to the school, see how the schools can support them. Make sure they have time to do schoolwork in the home, a place that's quiet where they're not interrupted. Be involved with the school. Come to the meetings, get to know the teachers, get to know the staff. And also ask for help. You know, again, part of these, we do these presentations about risk factors because we want you to know that there is help out there. You shouldn't be alone in this. For the most part, it's not going to be that your kid is going to join a gang, but sometimes if he or she is going in that direction, we want to intervene as soon as possible so they don't put themselves in danger and increase their risk to hurt somebody or get hurt themselves. So a couple things here in terms of our prevention and intervention responses in Fairfax County. Again, we talked about the schools. We have here a nonprofit, which I'll talk about briefly, Northern Virginia Family Services, and the agency I'm based out of, the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court. So we have a free program that is, if you or a school person or another agency is working with a young person and we feel that they're at risk of gang involvement, right, looking at all those different risk factors, or they are gang involved, we have youth workers to work with the youth and the parent. We have our prevention cases, right? If they're at risk for it, our gang-involved cases, but we also have that program is also for youth and families that have been victimized by gangs. It could be victims of gang control trafficking, gang violence, or victims of gang intimidation and threats. It's for youth ages 10 to 21, because we know that recruitment can happen very early, starting at the elementary school level. They are free, and all of the counselors are bilingual. They speak English and Spanish, and they go out to the home once a week for approximately, could be 3, 4, 5 months to support the youth, help them identify what their goals are, identify what the needs of the family and youth are, and connect them to those supports. You also have supports from the schools through the administration, through the counselors, through referrals to different programs that the school has. And also, again, this is my role. Again, I had talked about we are trying to prevent kids from joining youth and young adults, assisting them to leave that lifestyle, but also holding gang members accountable for the crimes they commit in the community. I'm part of the Northern Virginia Regional Gang Task Force, where we talk about what is going on in this region in terms of gang activity and what resources we need to bring to our region. I have a team in the court service unit with the probation and parole officers to understand what our court-involved gang members need and what kind of criminal activity they're involved in the community, and to make sure that we're relaying that information, which we're allowed to do legally with the gang unit in the Fairfax County Police Department as well. I'm also, if you guys have questions as well, I'm also a point of contact for kids, for the parents, for service providers, and educators as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave about 4 minutes for any questions. And if anybody has any particular questions, you can contact the school, the family liaison, Carolina Dettel, an assistant principal, a social worker, some of the counselors. They have my contact information if you guys have any further questions. So in terms of different colors, we have different gangs here in Fairfax County. Some are wearing blue and white, some are wearing red and black. They associate with certain numbers like 13 or 18. They also wear, it could be like certain sports teams. They could wear certain belts from some different stores and certain brands. So again, those kind of things, it's the totality of something to really identify and see if somebody's in a gang. It's not just going to be, it's going to be the clothes. It's going to be the activity they're involved in, the places they go to, the people that they hang out with. So if there is a concern about something like that, especially in the school, I would say the first person that you contact is the school resource officer. And I talked about one of the risk factors in the past is, you know, the kids feel they could be discriminated against, so we don't want to start labeling kids as gang members just because of how they dress or how they look. Because some kids, they dress kind of like gang members or how gang members dress and vice versa, but we don't want to start targeting them and labeling them, because that also has a negative effect on youth. ¿Tú tienes una pregunta? She has the presentation. Missy has it. Yeah, if they want to take a picture and send. Don't send it all to the parent, but like a picture of something. That's fine.
We can send the Spanish version.
Yeah, just pieces. I wouldn't. Don't send the whole presentation. If they want particular information, but not the whole thing.
They just want the contact information. It's hard to read on the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
We'll send that.
And just let her know I have a parent that wants a question about it too. Okay. Tiene una pregunta. Muy buena pregunta. So the mom asked, so what can you do when somebody has been victimized or threatened by a gang and they end up saying something to an authority, but things get worse? So I'm gonna answer it to her in Spanish and then I'll answer it in English. Entonces, es una situación difícil. En mi opinión, por lo menos, es importante que las autoridades sepan, por si acaso, que ya saben que esta persona tiene problema con esta persona, pero se le tiene que decir a las autoridades que no vaya directamente y diga, oye, yo escuché que usted estaba haciendo tal y tal cosa, pero es necesario estar más vigilante de a dónde va, con quién está, por si acaso. Eso es un problema, eso toma tiempo de lidiar con eso, porque esas amenazas a veces continúan, pero si alguien no habla, igualmente van a continuar. Ese es el problema. Si no hablas, todavía esa persona va a estar amenazada. Si hablas, a veces se le puede poner cargos a esta gente. No siempre, depende si hay suficiente evidencia. Si se pone muy mal, en verdad a veces se tiene que ir a otra escuela, en mi opinión, si es posible. Si las cosas siguen empeorando y las autoridades no han podido proteger a esta persona y lo siguen asaltando o algo así. Pero usted también, yo le voy a dar mi número, usted me puede llamar porque esto sí pasa, son situaciones muy difíciles. No hay una respuesta que es muy eficiente en esa situación, como es una situación muy difícil, diría yo, ¿ok? Pero yo te voy a dar mi número si tiene que ver con alguien que usted conoce, ¿ok? Spanish? Okay. So it's dang, did I already say what her question was? I did. Okay. There's not a great answer for it. If somebody is being threatened, I still would recommend that you tell authorities so they're aware of the situation. They need to take their own precautions. And sometimes it does take, if these threats or assaults continue and nothing is being done or there's not enough evidence to charge somebody, sometimes the best thing to do is to relocate or move them from that particular school. But that young person is going to need some support also individually, which could also be counseling. Any other questions? The girls. How the process to recruit girls is for a gang? Okay, so, yeah, so, this could be grooming. It depends on it depends on the age, but generally it can just start as a friendship. Somebody treating you well, doing things for you, buying things for you, inviting you to parties, even having, a relationship, with that female, inviting to meet the other gang members in social situations. And sometimes it is a relationship, but other times it can turn into something worse. It can turn into threats that they need to do certain things for them. They need to come to certain places. It can become abusive. It can become a relationship where they're being exploited. So there's different ways, but generally it starts with just friendship and reaching out and being nice. Sometimes it does involve some coercion, even in the beginning. Caroline, that was just going to be the last question, so we can leave enough time for the next presenter. Okay.
How do I do the next slide? Yeah, I'm sorry.
They're all.
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Laura Calvillo, and I'm a special agent with the FBI. I work out of the Washington Field Office Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force. So I'm going to talk to you about trafficking, and we're going to specifically try to talk about trafficking of juveniles. And before we kind of get into a larger conversation of trafficking, I just kind of want to go over what trafficking is and what trafficking isn't. And there are two types of trafficking. We have sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And today we're going to focus on sex trafficking. So trafficking is not the same thing as smuggling. The trafficking of a person is a crime against a person, for example, the sex trafficking or labor trafficking. Smuggling is a crime against a border, and that is when someone takes either contraband or a person across the border. So trafficking and smuggling are two separate things. In order for trafficking to be accomplished, it does not always require a person to move from one place to another. A person can remain in one place and still be a victim of trafficking. Trafficking is also not the same thing as prostitution. The trafficking of a person is the sexual exploitation of a human being, whereas prostitution is a person who's willfully engaged in commercial sex for money. When it comes to the federal definition of trafficking, trafficking is when a person receives money in exchange for a sex act. And for an adult, this can be accomplished through force, fraud, or coercion. And when we're talking about kids, there is no need for force, fraud, or coercion. If a child under the age of 18 is engaging in sex acts for money, that is illegal. So in this slide, we're going to go over a couple of different warning signs when we talk about child sex trafficking. And this is a very generalized topic here. These are just some of the common things that we see, but trafficking can look like a lot of different things, and so this is just kind of an overview. A lot of the juvenile victims that we see engaged in sex trafficking are chronic or repeat runaways. They tend to have a lot of absence from school. When they come back from these, stints of running away, oftentimes they have things that they shouldn't have or that they can't explain. They may have excess amount of money or credit cards or expensive clothes, jewelry, things that they could not afford on their own. They may also have a cell phone that the parent did not provide them. After a child is done running away and they come back, they are not able oftentimes to explain what they were doing or where they have been. So one sign that a kid has been trafficked is their inconsistent statements or their inability to say what happened. A lot of the kids that we see that are being trafficked are also vulnerable in other ways. They have been previously sexually abused or physically abused or neglected in the home. Traffickers tend to exploit these vulnerabilities in kids and try to bring them into what they view as a family environment. Sometimes when these kids come back after having run away and being trafficked, there will be signs of physical injury. They could be signs on the body or sexual abuse injuries as well. These children often display a lot of different issues. They may have high anxiety, they may suffer from depression, they may have PTSD, or they may act in a very submissive way because they have been controlled by a trafficker over a period of time. Another warning sign in children that have been trafficked is drug abuse. Kids will be given drugs by the trafficker in order to control them and keep them compliant. And also the children are taking the drugs in order as a way for them to deal with what they have to do in the life. I think Francisco did a fantastic job about talking about the gang-related activities in the area, and we do see that one of the illegal activities that some of the gangs are doing is they're engaging in commercial sex with children. So they are trafficking out children as a way to fund the game. We have seen several cases of this in the area. And oftentimes the victims of these sex trafficking are coming from the same neighborhood as the gang members, and they are often acquainted in some way, whether it's through family or friends, to the gang. When we see kids being sexually exploited by the gang, the kids are often getting into it because they view the gang as a family, and that this is a way in which they can help the gang, get money and keep going. We have not seen the gang members go outside of their demographic or geographical area to recruit victims. So like I said, it's something that's happening within the community. They do impose a lot of violence as a coercive tactic to keep the kids submissive and to keep them compliant. If a child does get involved in sex trafficking with the gang, initially the child may view it as something they're doing on their own to help the gang, but what often happens is at some point the child will want to leave, and they are kept there by physical force or violence or threats to the child's family. So it does end up becoming a coercive and controlling environment for that child. In this slide, this is so Matthew Uraskin is a defendant that has been convicted of sex trafficking a child. And this case is a little different than our typical case where of a trafficker trafficking a kid. According to the federal definition, a trafficker can be a person who is receiving money and pimping out a kid. So they're receiving money in exchange for that child to do sex acts. But that trafficker can also be a client. The federal definition allows for a client to be considered a trafficker. In this case, Matthew Uraskin was a person who was paying children to have sex with him, and that met the federal definition for a trafficker. And he was charged federally for sex trafficking children. In this case, he recruited children out of a high school and then had those kids recruit other kids as well. He would pay them in money, give them expensive gifts, and offer them a lifestyle that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to have. And he would also give them alcohol and drugs and other things to keep them coming back and keep them compliant. He also secretly recorded some of these encounters with the kids, so he was also involved in the production of child pornography, which is another federal offense. We talked a little bit about sex trafficking, and another area that we are seeing that is on the rise, especially all across the country, it's on the rise, is sextortion. Sextortion is basically when someone gets an image of a child or an adult, and they then turn around and use that image to extort a person for money or for more images. There are two different motivations for sextortion. One motivation is financially driven, and the other motivation is sexually driven. And those two drives are very different. So the people that are driven by money, they're usually subjects that are from overseas, and they're contacting a lot of people. They're just reaching out to everybody they can, and if they get a single image of a person, whether it's an adult or a child, they will then use that image to extort money from them. If they're unsuccessful in getting that money from the person, then they will put that image out to the entire person's social media, to all their family, friends, and so it's a form of blackmail. The subjects that are sexually driven are usually interested in child pornography, so they can pretend to be anybody online. They can pretend to be a child or a young female, and they will contact both boys and girls under this fake identity, form a relationship with these kids online, and then get the children to engage in sexually explicit acts on either video or on a picture. And as soon as this person receives these sexually explicit images of children, they will then blackmail that child and say, if you don't send me more images and more videos, I'm gonna post this all across your social media account. All your friends, family, teachers are going to see this. And so oftentimes they are successful in keeping that child, giving them more and more images, and until it comes to a breaking point where that child is just no longer willing, or they tell a parent, or somehow it gets found out. A lot of those subjects, we're seeing a mix of those coming from overseas and from within the United States. This particular case right here, Filippo, he was a Virginia subject who was in contact with tons and tons of kids. He was pretending to be somebody else online, reaching out to several minors, got a lot of sexually explicit images of these minors, and then turned around and extorted them for more images. He was found guilty, and I am not sure if he's been sentenced yet in this case, but he's looking at a very significant sentence. But this is something that we commonly see. Another thing with sextortion that we're seeing this slide right here is just talking about the sextortion scams that I already talked to you about in terms of the financially motivated crimes. A lot of those are coming from, like I said, overseas, and they're getting, either cash in their bank accounts or gift cards or other items, and we have to send that information off to those other countries for those countries to take action against the subjects. One thing I will say when we talk about sextortion, we are seeing a rise of it in the high school communities. And sometimes it can be kids sextorting other kids. So if there's a boyfriend and a girlfriend engaged in a relationship, and they create a video together of sexual activities, one partner can turn around and try to extort the other partner for things in the relationship or for money or for, whatever they want. We're getting a lot of reports of that. We're getting a lot of reports of kids in the community being contacted by scammers overseas who are trying to extort these children for money. The ones that are coming from overseas that are trying to get money, they are not only contacting kids, they're contacting adults and children. But we're seeing more reports coming from kids because they're telling their parents. I know I kind of went through a lot of that information very quickly, so I will pause here if there's any questions.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, especially to our presenters. And those of you at home who have watched, thank you for joining us.